And he said to me, in 2 days' time, you will need to decide whether you return home to me, to my choir, or whether you decide to start your mission in earnest. And I was sitting there and like every hair on my body just stood up to attention. And I remember the lady said to me, you can ask questions. And I was crapping myself. My nails were literally gripped into the chair. And I got the courage to say, who are you? And there was this pause. And then the answer came. And the answer was,
My guest today is Josie Thomson. Josie stands as a beacon of transformation, a multi-award winning coach, captivating speaker, and celebrated author committed to catalyzing profound change in the lives of others. She has dedicated her life to unleashing the full potential within, and with a deep-rooted expertise in neuroscience, energy healing, and personal work, Josie has become the catalyst for countless journeys towards conquering adversities and forging lasting transformations. Josie has experienced 3 near-death experiences and lives on to share messages of hope and wisdom to inspire others to live life fully, which she certainly leads by example. Thank you so much, Josie, for being my guest. I am honored and blessed to have you today.
it's good to be here.
You've had 3 near-death experiences that have helped shape your life where you are today. Can you start by telling us about those experiences?
Yeah, sure. The first two occurred in fairly quick succession back in 1991. I was 24 years old. I was super fit and healthy, didn't drink or smoke or anything like that. And I was just experiencing a little bit of discomfort in my throat. And as we generally tend to do, we ignore these things until they become alarm bells where we can't ignore them anymore. And it got to a point where I couldn't swallow properly. So I ended up going to the doctor and he said, okay, I think it's glandular fever. However, let's do an ultrasound just to be sure. And thankfully he did that because what he was able to see was that there was a tumor in the right lobe of my thyroid gland. So he said, okay, that's got to come out. And given your demographics, we're not going to bother with a biopsy. Now, we have to remember back in 1991, the word cancer was extremely rare. You hardly heard the word, unlike today. And so it wasn't even in the realm of conception to consider this could be something like that. So I went ahead and had the surgery. And he said to me, look, you'll probably only be in hospital for about 24 hours and then you'll go home. And I said, okay. So anyway, we got past 24 hours and he hadn't come and he promised he would come and see me post-surgery. And it was nearly midnight. And I remember my then husband was sitting beside me and the doctor came in the door and, you can tell when someone's been emotional, their eyes are a bit puffy and, and I'm thinking, oh, something's not right here. And he just looked at me and he said, Josie, I don't know how to tell you this. It is cancer, it is malignant, and it is stage 3. And he said, we will require another surgery because it will be spreading now. And it did actually spread to my sternum and my lungs. He said, so when can we do this? And without even thinking, it just felt surreal. The words just felt surreal to me. Like I don't think I really understood fully what it meant. Like I'd heard the word cancer before, but all of a sudden this was happening to me. And I just felt, I won't even say numb because it wasn't a panic. There was this surrealness about it. And these words just spilled out of my mouth. And I said, if you don't do this first thing tomorrow morning, I am never going to let you touch me again. And one thing I know about me is I'm female, I'm Taurian, and I'm super stubborn. And when I set my sights and focus on something, I'll make it happen. And so anyway, he was able to do the second surgery at 8 o'clock the next morning. So it was super fast. However, I lost a lot of blood and I was in intensive care for a period of time, totally unconscious. But during that time in ICU, I could only have my immediate family and my two closest friends come visit me. And the whole time this physical body was unconscious, I was fully aware of who was coming and going in the room, who was saying what conversations were taking place, exactly what was being said, and where people were positioned in the room. Like I had full awareness of all of that. Anyway, the first NDE occurred, it was a very late afternoon. No one else was in the room. There was a couple of nurses along the side because there was a few people in the ward, unconscious. And I had this awareness that I was floating up at the ceiling level, looking down at me on the bed, thinking, okay, I'm here and I'm there. But there was no panic. There was no judgment about it. It was just a pure observation. And I'm just blissfully up here, you know, extreme serenity, looking down at my physical form. And then all of a sudden the line goes flat on the monitor. And there's this panic. These two nurses come in and they revive this physical body. But before they revive, while it's flat, I'm just observing. And I'm going, oh, you know, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden I hear this booming male voice come at me from the left side. And all he said to me was, it's not your time yet. And in that instant, I was catapulted back into my body. And that's when the nurses revived me. And then that was the first time. And I didn't actually regain consciousness yet. And then I had the second one the next day. Exactly the same thing happened. So flatlined again, up I went, looking down at my physical form, this big male voice come in, one of those voices that you just don't mess with. And all he said was, it's not your time yet. And I went straight back into the body and then out I came. And now all of a sudden I had this awareness that I never had before. I'd never heard of an NDE. I didn't even know they existed. And then all of a sudden I had this experience that was undeniable. When I tried to talk about it to anyone, they were like, oh yeah, you know, you're delusional, you're drug affected, you know, you're up to here in morphine. But there was this knowing within me that said, no, that was real. That happened to me. But how do you explain it? And what does it actually mean? And who was that voice? And what is it for my life now? Like life can't return to life prior to something like that experience. It can't, because you can't unknow or unexperience something, right? Once you've experienced it, it's there. And so anyway, I didn't know how to integrate that into my life. However, it really did set me off on a new path of inquiry and seeking to understand, you know, what is cancer? How do you get it? Why did I get it? How do you heal it? I bought every book I could possibly get my hands on. And in those days, there was no internet, right? I'm older than Google. I kind of laugh about that. And, you know, I had this quest to understand because I have a highly analytical brain. Once I get my head around something or understand it, it doesn't create a threat to me. I'm not fearful of it if I understand it. But you're going into a realm that you're not always going to understand, you know, not just the disease side of things, but certainly the NDE side of things. And my greatest mission was to heal. My husband that night stood at the door after the doctor had given the news, and he just looked at me, and there was something in my core that said, you know what, Josie, he's not coming back. And he didn't return. So this was a really fierce journey for me to decide to choose which battle I was going to win. My battle was to choose life. So not fight against my disease. There was something innate in me that knew that I must not fight against myself. I must not fight against my body. I must not fight against something that I had a hand in creating, right? And I wasn't interested in fighting my ex-husband because I understood firsthand in an instant what fear felt like. And in an instant, I also realized that I couldn't surrender to fear, that I knew that if I got facts, I could confront the fear in a more empowered state. And so that was the journey for me. That was my quest and the birth of the seeker in me. And they were the first two NDEs that I experienced.
You didn't want to fight yourself to fight your own body for something that you had a hand in creating. Was that something you learned in your NDE?
Look, I think the NDE, those two first NDEs were more about opening my awareness to a consciousness beyond physical form. Like I had no appreciation for the fact that there was, other realms of reality or consciousness that existed. None at all. I had a very, simple upbringing. I was raised in the Catholic Church system, and my belief systems were fairly set, but they weren't my own. They were belief systems that I adapted and adopted from people that I respected and looked up to and believed in. And now all of a sudden, all of that programming was up for negotiation because there was distortion in the narrative. The God that I knew of wouldn't do this to a good person. There was just too many, circuit breakers going off in my programming in my mind to try to make sense of what was actually going on for me. So I would say that the NDEs, really the first two, were about opening my level of awareness and consciousness to, I don't even know how to put it into words. I've never really thought about it before. To understand that there's more beyond the physical form, more than what you've read about, more than what you think you know. There is so much more. And so in a way, I just, the quest that I initially went on was the quest for healing rather than exploring that spiritual dimension, although it was kind of happening in tandem. I realized there was something more out there, out everywhere, but my immediate journey was the one to heal my physical form. And that's what I set out to do. I changed every single thing about my life. And for the first time ever, I backed myself. Like I was the eldest daughter of an Italian family. Duty and obligation was my middle name. You said yes to be accepted and valued and appreciated and seen. But all of a sudden, I had permission to say no. All of a sudden, I had permission to claim my own voice and my own truth. And not just that, to actually take bold steps in the direction that felt right to me. And I think before, I had these inclinations and senses of what I should and shouldn't do or what I wanted to do, but wouldn't dare do it because I wouldn't want to disappoint the people that I looked up to and loved and respected, because I really wanted their approval and their love. And all of a sudden I had permission to go, actually, you know what? I need to do life my way because this way hasn't really worked. And my body's given me a warning, a wake up. And that wake up was to claim my voice. And this is where our creative expression comes from. And it had been blocked and suppressed. And that wasn't going to happen anymore. So all of a sudden I found my voice. I moved interstate away from the family when all logic would say, Josie, you need to stay around family because you're going to need their support to get through this journey. But something deeper in here was saying, go. And I remember I was having radioactive iodine, and radiation therapy straight into my veins, which they don't do anymore, thank goodness, because it kills you. But somehow I survived. And while I was having that treatment, the HR director of the business interstate rang me and said, why haven't you applied for this job in Brisbane? And I said, well, I'm having treatment for cancer at the moment. And his words were, well, that's no excuse. Get up here and have an interview. And I'm so glad he insisted, because I flew up, had the interview, they offered me the job, and all of a sudden I had this battle between the head and the heart. And that night I prayed and I just said, I don't know what to do here. Please let me know by morning what you want me to do. And the next morning I was so calm, didn't even think about it, picked up the phone, said, I'm going, I'm coming. And then I went into freak out going, what am I doing? What am I doing? But there was this knowing within me to say, Josie, you know you're going to get well. And the reason, I'll tell you, and people ask me, why did you move and why did you stay? It's because of the sun. You know, Queensland or Brisbane is actually known for the sunshine. We're called the Sunshine State. And it's very rare that you have one day in the whole year that you don't see the sunshine. And there was something in me that said, I need to see the sun every day because it makes me feel good. And that was a really key part to my healing. There's so much more, but that was a really key part. And so that NDE kind of shook things up a little bit and just gave me permission to kind of go, there's more to this. And now it's time to trust yourself and your instincts because they're coming from somewhere higher.
And that's not the first time I've heard about the sun being a key in the healing after a near-death experience or even during a near-death experience.
There's plenty of research. I since then have done a lot of studies, and one of those was master's studies in neuroscience. And there's plenty of research papers that will validate the healing benefits of the sun. They're just not made, I won't say public because they're public, they're just not amplified. We've got to search that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, that's not amplified. That's a good word for it.
Mm.
So you've had these two near-death experiences. You are healing with the sun. You've got a new job. What happens
Yep.
next?
Well, there's kind of two stories, one with an NDE and one with a connection to the other realm. And I think I feel like I need to share that one as well. So I'll share that one first. So in 2009, I find myself as a single mom. I've remarried. I have two young children. And then all of a sudden I start experiencing tingling down the right side of my face. And I'm thinking, well, it's not a stroke. And I can't quite figure out what it was. And by this stage, I'm studying neuroscience and really understanding the nature of the brain and a lot of its potential. And it's pretty exciting stuff. And I was really loving my studies. And all of a sudden, this is going on. And I'm thinking, I wonder what that is. And then I started getting headaches, and I never get headaches. And I thought, I should get it checked out. So on Christmas Eve, 2009, I go and see a neurosurgeon who had previously arranged, because I had an initial visit, he arranged an MRI and some other scans. And he gave me the news that I had a brain tumor and that I would need to have it removed. And this is Christmas Eve. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through Christmas and New Year? When can we organize this surgery? I don't want to distress my birth family and my children. And I certainly wasn't going to tell them until after the festivities. So that made it really tough because I had to suppress, a truth that was, almost eating me up because it was scary, because this time it wasn't just me I had to think about. I had two little kids, and there was a lot running around in my head. So a girlfriend of mine said, look, there's a spiritual healer interstate that you need to go and speak to. But I'll just give you warning, she's booked out years ahead. But if you're meant to see her, you will. And I think it would be useful for you to go see her. So I rang this woman up. And my surgery was booked for the 28th of January, 2010. And on the 26th of January, it's what's called Australia Day, and it's a public holiday here. So anyway, I rang her 2 days after Christmas, and I said, "Hi, my name's Josie. I'm calling from Brisbane. I really need an appointment with you as soon as possible." And she started laughing. She said, "I'm booked out 3 years ahead." She said, "But let me see what I've got." And she's looking at, and she knew nothing about me. And she said, "Actually, I've just had a cancellation for the 26th of January. Would you like that appointment? It's a 5-hour appointment and you have to fly to Sydney." And I said, "Absolutely." So something in me said, "Go." So I flew down to Sydney, met with this woman, and I'd never, ever seen a psychic medium who actually embodies the entities, like not just the voice, but the physical form shifts. And she had warned me about that when I sat down in front of her. And she said, "Look, if you get scared or you want to stop, just say stop. You know, I'm still in the room, but these voices and entities will come through to speak with you through my body. You're totally safe. It's all for your highest good," right? I'm like, okay. And I was very skeptical, you know, just sitting back going, "Yeah, whatever." And so anyway, she does this thing with her head, and all of a sudden she kind of leans in and her shoulders come forward, and she starts talking in this male Asian voice. And I'm thinking, and it's really difficult to understand the accent because it's a really thick Asian accent. And this Asian, it's an Asian doctor, and he's telling me, "In 2 days' time, you'll be given many choices for therapies and treatments, but these are the only ones that you must take." And I'm thinking, okay. And I hadn't told her anything. So he kept going, and then he finished, and she came back in the room. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yep." And she said, "There's someone else." And I said, "Okay." So anyway, she did this thing with her neck, and then all of a sudden the body literally gets big like this. And then all of a sudden this big booming male voice comes out of her. And I'm thinking, I close my eyes. I'm like, I know that voice. And he says to me, he says to me, "In 2 days' time, you're going to be given a choice, but you must decide." And I'm thinking, what does that mean? And I asked, I said, "What does that mean?" And he said to me, "In 2 days' time, you will need to decide whether you return home to me, to my choir, or whether you decide to start your mission in earnest." And I was sitting there, and like every hair on my body just stood up to attention. And I remember the lady said to me, "You can ask questions." And I was crapping myself. My nails were literally gripped into the chair. And I got the courage to say, "Who are you?" And there was this pause, and then the answer came. And the answer was Archangel Gabriel. And I just burst into tears, and all I felt was unconditional love. I just felt like I was just wrapped in these massive wings of protection and unity, you know. And I still didn't know how I was going to go. I didn't know which way I was going to choose, but it was kind of comforting to know that I was part of his choir, you know, and I'd never heard that word before either. And then the woman kind of came back into her body and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm okay." And then she said, "Oh, there's another entity that wants to talk to you." And I'm thinking, "Oh, here we go." So then she does this thing again with her neck, and she starts sitting down in her chair, and this little kid's voice comes out of her mouth. And she says, "I got something for you." And I'm going, "Oh, do you?" She says, "Yep." And she starts trashing this woman's office. She starts pulling things away everywhere and opening drawers and throwing things everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to get in trouble for this, you know. And then she finds this shell, and I should have got it from I've got it in my bedroom still. And you know how sometimes you see layered shells on the beach? They're just layered, thick shells. And sometimes there's a bit of a chip. And when you touch it, it's a bit powdery. Anyway, she finds this chipped layered shell, quite large. And she says, "See this?" She says, "That's your bones, and we're going to make it all better." I said, "Okay." And now one thing that she didn't know anything. Not only did they find a brain tumor. They also found 3 lesions of bone cancer on my right hip, my right ribs, and around the lesion on my skull. And so that made a lot of sense to me. And she said, you take this and you tell the doctor to strap it on your hand because we're going to make you all better. And so I took that shell in with me. And I remember Archangel Gabriel also said to me, when you're placed on the operating table, make sure you lay with your palms up because we're going to be holding your hands. And so that's what I did. So when I went in, saw the anaesthetist and the surgeon, I took the shell. I said, can I make a strange request? They said, yes. I said, is it possible to strap this to my palm? And they looked at it to make sure there was no metals or anything in the shell. They said, yeah, that's fine. They didn't argue. They didn't ask questions, thank goodness. How would you explain that? And they just strapped it to the palm of my hand. And going into that, I remember losing consciousness and I still didn't know which way I was going to choose. And it was only much later that, you know, the doctor actually asked me, he said, look, when we were putting you under, you said something and I'm curious what it meant. I said, what did I say? And he said, just before you lost consciousness, you said, I've decided. And I just went, oh, it's a long story. I couldn't tell him because there's no way he'd understand.
Those answers that you received or the communication was very validating. And so you felt that the communications that you were receiving were genuine then.
Totally genuine. I still knew that I had free will, which is how it's all structured, right? So even though I knew I was going to be given the choice, I still didn't know which way I was going to choose because physically I felt weak. Spiritually, I was wobbly. I didn't know which way I was going to go. But clearly, once I hit that, you know, once I was under anesthetic, there's this spiritual renewal that occurs. And clearly the answer came in right at that moment without my conscious awareness. So coming out of that was another phenomenal journey because I had to apply everything I had learned from science to retrain my body's capacity to walk and talk properly again. And I did.
At this point, you had already had 2 near-death experiences. You're heading in for another surgery. You're talking to a medium who's bringing forth archangels and guides, possibly guardian angels. I don't know. Do you know who the others were?
Yeah, the Asian was, I forget his name now. He's the doctor that invented Reiki. So before that surgery, I had done up to level 2 studies in Reiki. And then the little child was a, a cherub angel.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Were they part of maybe your soul family?
Well, I know that part of my mission, because the conversation I had with her was, you know, she said to me, do you realize that how much you love babies and children? I said, yeah, I do. She goes, no, you really, really, really love babies and children. And I said, yeah, I do. She said, do you know why? And I said, no. She says, that's because when you're up here, you're the one that takes care of us and you make us laugh. And it's so true. Like if I go anywhere and there's a baby within, you know, eyesight, if we lock eyes, there's this magnetism and connection that occurs that just uplifts my soul in a way that's indescribable. I will even lose focus on my own children to focus on a baby somewhere in the room. And my kids are exactly the same now. So it's just a very special bond and connection that I have with little ones.
Did you lose your fear of death after your first 2 near-death experiences?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I realized the biggest insight I had was suffering occurs on this side of the veil. There is no suffering on the other side. And since then, I've done training with David Kessler, who wrote the book on grief and grieving. And he also did some work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote on death and dying, which was one of the first books I read along with the cancer books, because, hey, it was a reality. It could really happen to me. So instead of being fearful of it, I wanted to understand it. And if I could get my head around it, maybe I didn't need to be so fearful. And the more I read about it, the more I realized, well, actually, the fear occurs here. There's none on the other side. The suffering occurs here. There is none of that on the other side. I know that from firsthand experience. And having done the training with David, what I learned was that, having seen my granddad pass away, one of the very last things he did before, like, he was completely unconscious and he was, in this lifeless state in bed. And just as he drew his last breath, his physical form shot up out of the bed, and literally he raised his two hands up to the corner of the room like someone was going to pick him up. And he was raising his hands up to them. And he opened his eyes wide. And then his body collapsed back into the bed and he was gone. And we're always really curious about what was that? And in David's book, I think it's called Trips, Visions and Crowded Rooms, something like that. He actually explains and describes many occasions where he, as a palliative care nurse, witnessed the exact same thing with all of these patients and his deduction was that, they would start hallucinating people that had passed over that were actually in the room that were visiting. So they'd be saying, oh, Auntie May's here, and oh, my dog from childhood is here, oh, my mum's here and my dad's here. And the family would think, oh, it's the medication. But actually, it's spirit coming in to ready you for the journey you're about to take. And so for me, it's like we're birthed into this life with people with open arms and hearts welcoming us to physical life. And when we transition to that next life, we have a massive army with their arms and hearts wide open to receive us. What do we have to fear?
I agree. No fear. I think when we learn about near-death experiences, it does take away the fear of death, especially if you've actually had one. You've been there, you know there's no death. But learning about them also takes away the fear. And so we can live in a better way, in a more fulfilled way. We can live without thinking, oh, everything has to be perfect. It's not the be all end all. So your story helps so many people, not just to not be afraid of death or heal from grief, but be able to live in a better way currently, right now.
So one thing I want to say there is death. There is death of the human form, right? And we experience death every single day without even being consciously aware. Every time we inhale, there's a death of that breath as we exhale. There's just micro deaths that we are experiencing every single day. This moment ends, then the next one begins. So this physical life will end, but this other amazing unlimited life begins. But we get so attached to physical form and our physical belongings and our materialism that we start attaching, and that's where the grief and suffering comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to lose my kids, I'm going to lose my home, I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. Well, hey, you're only here as a visitor and it's temporary. And you knew that when you signed up for this journey. And it's going to be a journey of releasing and letting go. But if you can do that with tremendous peace and grace, then it makes it easier, not just for you, but for all of those who love and care for you as well. And I've helped a lot of people exit with peace and grace.
Now you are going into surgery, your second
Yeah,
or third surgery.
I've had many surgeries, but this
Okay.
latest one was, it wasn't a surgery actually. So in 2000, where are we? 2024. So 2022, I started experiencing very severe neurological pain down the right side of my body. And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go again, you know. So went and had a lot of scans and different tests done. And we've discovered that the scar tissue from that original cranial surgery is now sitting on some nerves, and there's two other lesions in my brain, and not safe to operate. And so I've been working with a neurologist who suggested this new treatment. And the new treatment was to be hospitalized and to be given supervised levels of ketamine that apparently will, ease that neuropathic pain. And I'm thinking, I did a research. I said, is it safe? I spoke to people that had had it, and they all seemed really happy with the results. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's try it. So I did the first round in November 2022 and had tremendous success. So for over 6 months, I had no pain at all, and I could sleep, and it was wonderful. And then the symptoms started coming back in June, and it was really, really bad, really chronic. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. Some days I couldn't talk properly. It was really not pleasant at all. And it was sometimes numbing the use of my right arm, but it would stop at the hip. It was just the whole right side of the body. And so the doctors just said, okay, no problem. We'll just go in for another round of ketamine treatment. And so given the success of the first round, I had no trepidation about it. And so I went ahead and did it. But this time, the hospitals had been strained with all the COVID fallout of what had occurred with staffing and everything and protocols. And it was a completely different experience. So for the first 5 days of that ketamine treatment, I was not being monitored with bloods, which is what they need to be doing. And as a consequence of that, I started complaining that I had this flaring pain underneath, the right chest area. And, the registrar doctors and the hospital doctors came in, but they were young and inexperienced. And I kept complaining. I said, this has to stop. You need to take this out, or you need to reduce the dose. Doesn't feel right, Why don't you just call my doctor? Oh, it's the weekend. She'll be in on Monday. And I'm like, but I need her now. This isn't good. Anyway, cut long story short, my body went into toxic shock. And thankfully, I had a girlfriend there with me, and she commissioned one of those foil blankets to try to get heat into my body. But it was pretty scary that night. She got a couple of my really close friends in the room who were healers. And I was completely unconscious, and I could see this golden, the only word I can use is like a template rising up out of my physical body. And I could see this white torus field coming down into the room from the corner. And it was sucking this template matrix out of my body up into this torus field. And I was like, what? Hang on, wait, am I dying here? Remember, I'm unconscious, but I'm fully aware of what's going on. I'm aware that my physical body's unconscious. I'm aware that there are 5 people in the room giving healing and energy towards me. I'm aware of this scene playing out in this other realm. And I'm like, what? No, this wasn't meant to happen. This wasn't even a possibility for the treatment that I was happening. And anyway, then I just went, wait, I've got to say goodbye. So an element of my awareness was able to leave the room, go and find my father interstate in the garden and say goodbye to him, go and find my mother in the kitchen where she was cooking and say goodbye to her, go and find my brother in the car where he was driving, my sister at her house. And then I found both my children, at that higher realm, and said goodbye to them. And then my awareness was back in the room in this other dimension. I said, okay, I'm ready now. And then all of a sudden, this almighty voice rose from my body and just started ranting at me and said, you have abused me and used me and exhausted me and pushed me beyond my capacity. You're not going to be the one who decides when you leave. It is me. And I was like, and I started crying. I could feel myself crying. I was just stunned and frozen. And the people in the room could see this physical body with tears coming out, but they had no idea what was going on up here. And I was like, who are you? And it was my body. My body had a voice. And my body was saying, you know what? When I decide to tap out, that's when you die. You're not going to make this decision. And I was like, oh my goodness. I had never properly appreciated what this body was. Never. And so since that experience, so regained consciousness, my liver was completely smashed. I've sustained, internal injury that we're still working through. But I'm here and I'm aware and I'm more awake than ever. And I am supremely grateful and respectful and in a much better relationship with this physical form than I have ever been.
Do you feel like you were sent back for a purpose?
Every time, it's kind of like the hero's journey. The whole idea is that you have these challenging experiences, and when you get through them, you must share that wisdom to benefit others. You must give them the benefit of that wisdom, and not false hope, but real hope, because this is experienced wisdom. It's not theoretical. I can't make this stuff up. This is something I've physically lived through. So I actually know what I'm talking about here. Right? So people can have their experiences. They can like what I have to say or not. I actually don't care. I know that my message will resonate with those people who need to hear it and who want to heal.
Who are ready
And
to hear it?
people, yeah, who are ready and really want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And, the divine timing is always in play. I've had all this for a long time and never known how to channel it into the world. And all of a sudden I've had you and I've had Jeff contact me out of the blue and say, share your story. And I'm like, okay, it's happening. Okay, I'm here to serve. Show me how you want me to do this.
But yeah,
It's happening.
yeah, there's something about you that's standing out. It's time to share your story and get it out to as many people as possible because it does help so much. And so your life has been changed as a result of all these experiences that you've had, not only in your personal life, but in your business life as well. Is that correct?
My business life is in pieces at the moment because it's not going to reshape into what it used to be. I have no clue how to label it, how to how to even bring it together. So I'm kind of at the moment, I'm just leaving it where it is and just allowing the universe to carry me forward for now. I'm not thinking, I'm surrendering all of that. And the way I'm surrendering and I'm answering the call. And at some point, I'm going to have to go and reconstruct the website and the wording of what I do. But that's secondary to just living and being on purpose.
And I think you'll know the time, and you know that probably better than anyone, that you'll know when the time is right. You talked about divine timing, and that is 100% a real and actual thing. Did you come back from your near-death experiences with any gifts, like maybe any ESP gifts?
I don't know how to describe this. This awareness, this expanded awareness, has me connected to that quantum field. So my reality is bigger than the physical form. There's a knowing. I just know stuff. And I've always felt that I could sense what was going on for people. But I didn't understand it very much. Whereas now I'm totally surrendered to that clairsentience and I trust it implicitly. And so if someone comes to mind, I pick up the phone and I will call them. If someone sends me a message, I will respond, right? So, I know that there's more to what I need to do, but it's just, I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to let the universe show me how to serve for the greatest good.
What have you been doing so far to serve since you've come back?
Well, the biggest thing since July is I've really stepped away from my work big time. Like I'm still available for elements of my work, but the majority of the work that I was doing, I've stepped right back from because I realized that my healing is my greatest gift to this world. So I need to take my healing much more seriously. So I've really given most of my focus since July 2023 to my physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual healing. And it's my number one priority every single day. And by doing that, the most amazing opportunities are coming forward. I'm not actually out there hustling for work. It's whatever's meant to come to me is coming to me, and the most amazing opportunities are coming forward. And guess what? It's enough. It's always enough. I don't have to panic about anything. And I'm like, really? Is it that simple? Can it be that easy? Yes. You've been a bit slow for the uptake, but you're finally here.
I love when the universe shifts like that and we notice it. We realize all these things that we've been hearing about, that we've been reading about, the spiritual things for so many years, they're actually really true. And now it's starting to happen. And it goes back to divine timing. Maybe it's not the right time, but when it is, you're going to know. And all this learning in the background is to get you prepared for when it is the correct time.
And it's not easy. And you will experience tremendous loss along the way. I have lost communities of friendships and people that have been very close to me and part of my life for a very long time because we're resonating differently now. And the grief that I have experienced has been beyond words to describe. It's just, it's had me on my knees some days going, why are you taking all these people away from me? They've been my family. Like, what? And I just realized that I'm needing to operate in a different space. And so letting go is a vital part of claiming that space and being in alignment with your true call. It's not easy.
What was the most important lesson that you learned from your near death experiences?
That I'm not alone, that there is a massive, invisible army at our disposal, ready to help if we would only ask.
All it takes is to ask.
And to be open to receiving, because sometimes we ask in desperation, please, 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 and we plead, and that's a contracted way of asking. Whereas what we need to do is relax, open, know your worthiness, know your deservedness, and ask with a pure, open heart for what you want. Without that desperation, there's no need to be desperate. And so that resonance then attunes to that wish being granted. But sometimes not all wishes get granted. And that's because it's not meant to be. So it's important that we just don't attach. Like, we can make a request, but at the end of the day, it's always for the highest and divine good. And we can't know what that is. We're not in charge. That's the other thing I learned. I had this illusion that somehow I was in charge of my life. And I had a plan and I was going to do this and this and this. Well, I didn't choose these bumps in the road, and they weren't just bumps, they were complete detours, that set me off on realms of appreciation and understanding that I would never have chosen. And this is what I say about a change. It's either forced or it's chosen. It's easier if you choose it, but sometimes it's forced to get you back on track and in alignment. And it's uncomfortable.
If my viewers wanted to reach out to you if they had questions, would that be okay?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn, because that's what I am. I also have a free monthly newsletter that I write personally, that's quite personal. And I think it's quite valuable for people. And in terms of my offering, it's all changing. So just be patient with me. It's coming.
Well, we want it to be just perfect, so we'll be patient for the right timing.
Thank you.
And any last words of wisdom for my viewers?
Look, I love to end with this message, and I hope people take it with the spirit with which it's intended. And that is, pain in life is inevitable, because that's how we get to learn and grow. You think about a caterpillar coming out of the cocoon, it's really painful, but it earns its wings, right? Suffering, and this, I know a lot of people struggle with what I'm about to say, suffering is optional. We do it to ourselves, right? But growth is intentional. We choose that. So remember, it's not actually what happens to you that defines you. It's how you respond that counts. Shine on.
Very powerful words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Josie. And thank you for being my guest. Your stories, your experiences are incredible. They're absolutely amazing and help so many. So I appreciate you very much and wish you the best of luck in everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I just want to show my appreciation. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. So let's all spread the word, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. And together we can change the world. Thank you for all of your support, and I'm sending love to you.